My name is Olivia Carter. Growing up, I learned one painful lesson before I even understood what love was. In my family, I always came second. Actually, no, I didn't even come second. I wasn't on the list at all. Everything revolved around my older brother, Jason. When he wanted a new bike, he got it. When he wanted a new phone, my parents somehow found the money. When I asked for school supplies, Mom would sigh. Olivia, can you stop asking for things? Those words stayed with me for years. Every birthday felt the same. Jason received expensive presents. We'll make it up to you next year. They never did. Things became worse in high school. I worked every evening after school at a local coffee shop. Not because I wanted extra spending money, but because I needed to pay for my own books, clothes, and lunch. Meanwhile, Jason had everything handed to him. Dad even bought him a used car for his 18th birthday. When I asked if I could borrow it to get to work, Jason laughed. You can walk. Dad laughed too. Mom said nothing. That silence hurt the most. Despite everything, I graduated at the top of my class. My teachers encouraged me to apply for one of the best business schools in the country. I was accepted. It felt like my entire future had changed. Until dinner that night, I showed my parents the acceptance letter with tears of happiness in my eyes. Dad barely looked at it. That's nice. Mom smiled politely. Then Jason walked in carrying another letter. He hadn't been accepted anywhere. Instead, he wanted to start an online business. Dad immediately became excited. That's my boy. Mom hugged him. We'll help you. I looked around the room. What about college? Dad finally looked at me. We can't afford both. I stared at him. What do you mean? He avoided my eyes. We've decided to invest in Jason's future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, my education doesn't matter? Dad answered without hesitation. Jason has bigger potential. Those words broke something inside me. Not because I believed them, but because my own father did. A week later, I discovered the truth. The savings account Grandma had created for my education was empty. Every dollar had been withdrawn. Mom admitted everything. We used it to help Jason. I couldn't breathe. That money wasn't yours. Dad shrugged. We're your parents. It's family money. That night, I packed one suitcase. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done hoping they would change. Before leaving, I placed my house key on the kitchen table. Mom looked confused. Where are you going? I smiled through my tears. Somewhere I'm not a burden. No one stopped me. Not even once. The next few years were brutal. I worked 2 jobs. Waitress by day, office cleaner at night. There were nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't enough for my own family. But every morning, I got up again. Because nobody else was going to save me. At 24, everything changed. The small marketing company where I worked promoted me to project manager. Within 2 years, I became the youngest regional director in the company's history. Then something unexpected happened. The CEO announced his retirement. Several investors decided to launch a new company. They asked me to lead it. I was terrified. But I said yes. That decision changed my life forever. 5 years later, our company had offices in 3 states, hundreds of employees, millions in annual revenue. For the first time in my life, I didn't worry about paying bills. I bought my first home. A beautiful white house with a small garden. Every room reminded me of something I never had growing up. Peace. One Saturday morning, as I watered the flowers outside, a black SUV stopped in front of my driveway. I recognized it immediately. Dad's car. The same car he once refused to let me borrow. 3 people stepped out. Mom, Dad, Jason. For a moment, None of us spoke. Then Mom started crying. Olivia. We need to talk. Part 2 almost equals 1,500 words. My parents treated me like a burden. Years later they begged me to save them. For a few seconds, no one spoke. I looked at the 3 people standing in front of my house. The same people who had watched me leave with one suitcase. Without trying to stop me, Dad finally broke the silence. Olivia, can we come inside? I thought about saying no, but I wanted answers. I opened the door. They sat in my living room, looking around in disbelief. Mom stared at the modern furniture. Dad glanced at the framed awards hanging on the wall. Jason avoided eye contact. Finally, Mom whispered, "You've done well." I smiled politely. Dad cleared his throat. "We're in trouble." I waited. Jason finally spoke. "My business failed." I wasn't surprised. The same business my parents had sacrificed my education for had collapsed. He continued. "I borrowed too much money. Then I borrowed even more. I thought I could recover, but everything went wrong." Mom started crying. "We mortgaged the house to help him." Dad looked ashamed. "We've lost everything." The bank had already started foreclosure. Their savings were gone. Their retirement fund was gone. The family home would be auctioned within weeks. Then Dad looked directly at me. "We need a loan." There it was. The real reason they had come. Not because they missed me. Not because they regretted what they had done. Because they needed money. "How much?" Dad looked embarrassed. $500,000. I almost laughed. $500,000. The daughter they once called a burden was now expected to rescue everyone. I stood up and walked to the window. Memories flooded back. Working double shifts. Skipping meals. Walking to work in the rain. Crying alone in a tiny apartment. Not once had they asked if I was okay. Now they expected me to fix their mistakes. I turned around. "I have one question." Mom nodded. "When I needed help, where were you?" No one answered. I looked at Dad. "When my college fund disappeared, did you lose any sleep?" Silence. "When I worked 2 jobs, did anyone ever call me?" More silence. Jason finally whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "For what?" He wiped away tears. "For letting them treat you that way. I should have stopped it." "It wasn't your responsibility," I replied. "But you enjoyed the benefits." He lowered his head. "I know." Mom suddenly broke down. "We failed you." Those 3 words were the first honest thing I'd ever heard from her. She continued. "We spent years believing Jason needed us more. But all we really did was make him dependent." She looked at her son. "And we pushed you away." For the first time in years, I saw regret instead of excuses. Dad slowly removed an old envelope from his pocket. "I've carried this for months." Inside was my college acceptance letter. Perfectly folded. He said quietly. "I kept it." I couldn't throw it away. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the day I failed as your father. I felt tears filling my eyes. Not because the pain disappeared, but because someone had finally admitted the truth. I walked into my office, opened my safe, and returned with a folder. Dad looked hopeful. "Was it a check?" "No. It was a housing agreement. I've already bought a small duplex. There are 2 separate apartments. You can live there. Rent-free." Mom burst into tears. Dad looked confused. "But what about the money?" I shook my head. "I'm not paying your debts. You have to face the consequences. But I won't let you become homeless." Jason looked at me. "What about me?" I smiled gently. "I found a job opening. Warehouse supervisor." He looked shocked. "You want me to work there?" I nodded. "You'll earn every dollar. No shortcuts. No special treatment. For the first time in his life, someone expected him to stand on his own feet. The following months weren't easy. Dad took a part-time maintenance job. Mom started working at a local library. Jason worked 6 days a week. Slowly, they started rebuilding their lives. Not with my money, but with their own effort. One evening, Dad invited me to dinner. It was the first family dinner we'd shared in almost 10 years. Nothing fancy. Just homemade soup. Halfway through the meal, Dad stood up. He raised his glass. I spent years believing success belonged to my son. But success belonged to the child who never gave up. He looked at me. I was wrong. I'm proud of you. Those were the words I'd waited my entire childhood to hear. Ironically, by the time they came, I no longer needed them. A year later, Jason received another promotion. He had changed completely. One afternoon, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. It wasn't much. Only a small amount. He smiled. It's the first payment. For the college fund we stole. I looked at him. You don't have to. Yes, he replied. I do. It was always yours. Over the next few years, he continued making small payments. Not because I needed the money, but because he needed to make things right. Today, my parents often visit for Sunday dinner. We laugh. We share stories. Sometimes we even talk about the past. Not to reopen old wounds, but to remember how easily favoritism can destroy a family. People sometimes ask me why I helped them after everything they did. The answer is simple. Helping someone doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means refusing to become the kind of person who hurt you. I didn't save my family because they deserved it. I saved them because I deserved peace. Because carrying bitterness is a heavier burden than carrying forgiveness. And in the end, the greatest victory wasn't becoming more successful than my family. It was proving to myself that the girl they once called a burden had become the strongest person they had ever known.